Morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishna Yevamos, Parak Dala, Chapter 4, Mishnah Aleph, Mishnah 1. Okay, now, I just want to, before we start the Mishnah, I just want to read from the introduction here a little bit. If a man dies with children, his widow is free to marry others without ibum or chalitza, right? Mm-hmm. If she became pregnant from him before he died and gave birth after he died, she also does not require ibum or chalitza, provided the child is what we call a ben kayama, what they translate as viable or expected to live. What that means is like this, and this is an interesting point here on the bottom. By Torah law, even a child that dies shortly after being born exempts its mother from yibum or chalitza. That's according to Torah law. A child is born, even if it's not a viable child. That essentially, according to Torah law, exempts the woman from yibum or chalitza. The rabbis, however, required we must know that the child was viable, meaning expected to live. We know this to be true when the child is born after a full 9 months of pregnancy, or when it lives for at least 30 days. If a child is born after a shorter pregnancy and it lives for fewer than 30 days, we cannot be sure that it was viable, and the widow must therefore perform chalitza. This is going to be very relevant when we learn the Mishnah. Okay? Now, so that's number one. Now, another halacha that they bring down here is, if a man dies, his brother is supposed to wait 3 months before performing yibum or chalitza with the widow, so that we can tell whether she's pregnant or not. For the yibum part, you better for sure that's really dangerous if you wait. Because if there's no mitzvah of yibum, she's an erva. But we say, no yibum, no chalitza, wait 3 months, see if it's necessary. And our Mishnah, and the next Mishnah, is going to be talking about where a person did not wait. He didn't wait. So now, our Mishnah begins like this. A person does chalitza on his yibama. His brother dies without children. His wife falls to yibam. We're not talking about an erva here or not. We're talking about she's not related to the brother. There's the possibility. There's no issue with doing yibam other than the fact that, if she'd be pregnant. So she fell for yibam. He did chalitz on her. The nimtzis muberes, and it comes out that she was pregnant. The yolda, and she gave birth. Bizman shabalat shal kayama. If the child is considered shal kayama, it's viable, expected to live, as we explained just before. Hu muter b'krayvayseha b'muteres b'krayvav. He is permitted to marry her relatives, her close relatives. She is permitted to marry his close relatives. And he has not invalidated her from kahuna. Allah is like this. Person is married to a woman. So once he gets married to her, there are a lot of her close relatives that you may not marry. And that even after she dies or you divorce her, those relatives still remain forbidden. In the case of your wife's sister, if your wife dies, then you can marry her sister. If you divorce your wife, you cannot marry her sister. And then there are other relatives of your wife that you cannot marry even after she dies. Now whether she dies or whether she gets divorced. Now, according to Torah law, if you give your Yevama chalitza, that is not considered that you divorced your wife. She was never your wife. So essentially, according to Torah law, after you do chalitza to a woman, you can marry her relatives. But according to midrabanan, according to rabbinic law, they forbade it. Whoever you would be forbidden to if you divorced your wife, you are forbidden to if you did chalitza on your sister-in-law, as if she was your wife. Because chalitza is seen as similar to divorce, the same way, we don't want people to get confused, and therefore the same way after divorce, a man is forbidden to her relatives, and so too, she is forbidden to his relatives. There's certain people that she can't marry after she marries a man. And that prohibition continues even after she's divorced. So the same way we have these prohibitions after she's divorced, we have these prohibitions after chalitza. The same thing. A divorced woman may not marry a Kohen. According to rabbinic law, a woman who had chalitza performed to her can also not marry a Kohen. Now, in this case, it comes out when he did chalitza on his sister-in-law, he really didn't need to do chalitza because she was pregnant. and her child was viable. Okay, her child was viable, which means there was no need for Yibam or Chalitza. So the Chalitza was nothing. Since the Chalitza was nothing, then there's no ramifications from it. She can marry his relatives, he can marry her relatives, because they were never married. Nothing ever happened. They weren't married, nothing ever happened, because the Chalitza was nothing. However, the Mishna, and therefore, he also does it later from the Kahuna. The Chalitza was nothing. Ein avlat shel kayama, but if the child was not viable, then that means that, okay, there's a question. That was the Chalitza that was done, was it needed or not? If the child, like we said before, if the child dies after a shorter pregnancy and lives for fewer than 30 days, we can't be sure that it was viable. And in that situation, you're going to have to go ahead and do, in that case, the Chalitza you did has to be done, because we don't know. Did she really fall to Yibam or not? Right? Was there a child to this man after he died or not? And therefore, in that case, the Chalitza must be done. And the Chalitza was a Chalitza, or at least at a doubt. But it was a real Chalitza. So therefore, Ein avlat shel kayama, if the child was not viable, then that means the Chalitza was a valid Chalitza. It was a Chalitza that needed to be done. And then we say, Hu asur b'krei vayseha, he is forbidden to marry her relatives. The asura b'krei vav, she's forbidden to marry his relatives. Upasala min kahuna, and he has invalidated her from the kahuna. Because in this case, the Chalitza was a necessary Chalitza, and therefore, all the ramifications of the Chalitza apply. Midrabban, according to rabbinic law. The relatives become forbidden, and she becomes invalidated from kahuna. Okay, so the Chofetz Chaim began talking about the prohibition of accepting, believing Lashon Hara that you hear. Now, so now he says, if one accepts Lashon Hara, he transgresses a prohibition. Shenemar loy sisa shema shav, which means don't bear a false rumor, a false piece of news, which also is derived from there not to accept it. This is a prohibition regarding someone who accepts, who believes Lashon Hara. Besides, for the other possibilities of prohibitions and positive commandments, one can transgress that can come together, as the Chofetz Chaim has written previously. Our sages say, if you accept, whoever accepts, believes Lashon Hara, he should be thrown to the dogs. Shenamar, as it states, after it says, don't bear a false rumor, okay, after that it says, which it doesn't say it straight on that, but the next pasuk does say, and it's talking about an animal that was a treif, an animal that was killed without shchita, you shall throw it to the dog. So we take that part and we apply it not only to the first half of the verse, but to the verse before. Another thing the sages said, the one who accepts the Lashon Hara, believes Lashon Hara, it has a greater punishment than the one who actually says it. So that's the source about the prohibition of accepting, believing Lashon Hara. Just want to let everybody know that there will not be a morning class now until Mitzvah Shem next Tuesday morning. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.